We're live, everybody. Welcome in. It is Wednesday, October 25th, 2 p.m. Central. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are on recording, welcome. If you're live, we're live. Welcome in, everybody. Lots to talk about again today. GM is having a hell of a week, y'all. GM is having a big time week. One for the history books and for all the wrong reasons, unfortunately. This is a story from Reuters that broke today. Honda and GM scrapped their $5 billion plan to co-develop cheaper EVs. If we read a little bit into the article, I'm just going to highlight a few lines here for y'all. The U.S. automaker on Tuesday withdrew its previous 2023 profit outlook. After extensive studies and analysis, we have come to a mutual decision to discontinue the program. Each company remains committed to affordability in the EV market, the company said in a joint statement. Honda said there was no change to its plan to sell only electrified vehicles by 2040. Now, if we read further into the article, the two firms agreed in April last year to develop a series of lower price EVs based on a new joint platform, producing potentially millions of cars from the year 2027 and on. And then if we read a little bit further, there's a line in here that that GM had that I want to highlight, or that Honda had. Here we go. After studying this for a year, we decided that this would be difficult as a business. So at the moment, we are ending development of an affordable EV. Honda CEO Toshihiro Mibe, excuse the pronunciation, was quoted by Bloomberg as saying in an interview. Now, the sort of the top line of the article, the first paragraph, Honda and General Motors are scraping a plan to jointly develop affordable electric vehicles. The decision underscores GM's strategic shift to slow the launch of several EV models to focus on profitability as it grapples with the rising cost of United Auto Workers strikes, which surged to $200 million a week this month. Now, this comes on the heels of news that broke in the last 24 hours. There's a lot of stuff going on with GM right now. So yesterday was their earnings where they disclosed that they're losing about $200 million a week on EBIT, or profitability is another way of thinking about it, per week because of the United Auto Workers strike. Then shortly after the earnings was released, the UAW announced the strike to their largest automotive plant in the United States in Arlington, Texas, which is likely going to increase that $200 million per week loss significantly further because they build their most profitable cars there. They build Cadillacs, Yukons, GMCs, the most profitable cars that GM makes out of that plant. Then there was news that Cruise was suspended in California, which I have more on that here in this episode. The California DMV released the exact reason why Cruise was suspended. And then now we have news that GM and Honda are canceling their plans around an affordable EV program where they were looking to jointly go together and make cheaper EVs. Now, the automakers coming together and making platforms together to try and make it more affordable and less costly for the automakers is not new. This happens all the time in the gas car industry, at least. There's many different car platforms that share sort of the same platform, that share a lot of the same parts. For EVs, this is also happening right now. If you look at the partnership between Ford and VW, Ford is releasing the Explorer EV in Europe using the ID4, the ID platform, and there are other partnerships as well. So this is not really a new thing in the auto business, but the fact that they're canceling a cheaper EV, what that I think signals is that the difficulty of producing a mass market EV that's really affordable, unless you have years of experience or a unique setup as a business to really make those profitably, unless you have that, it's going to be extremely difficult to get that going, especially if you're a company like GM, who is already sort of tied down to its ICE car business, and Honda, which for some reason is not really heavily investing in EVs, similar to other Japanese makers as well. So this is something to track very closely. This opens the door. This is wide open for automakers that are willing to actually invest in affordable EVs. Players like Tesla will likely have a market all to their own now that we have confirmation that GM and Honda are just looking to delay their plans, potentially, or just cancel them outright. Players like BYD are going to be very successful in this space if they start entering the Western markets. So they're a Chinese automaker. They're in parts of Europe, but this could open the door for an automaker like BYD to come to the United States and sell very affordable EVs. And when I say affordable, I mean $25,000 or potentially even lower. So from a long-term perspective, this strategy, I think, is the incorrect one for legacy automakers because that's the next stage of the EV market. And I think what it's really starting to highlight, which is something we've talked about quite a bit on this channel, is that it's becoming quite obvious that legacy automakers are going to be focusing hardcore on expensive, potentially profitable EVs that are built in low volume in the hopes that their ICE car business, their internal combustion engine business, their gas car business, can hold them out long enough until they can get to profitability on the EVs. But that's not assured because even today, legacy automakers are not really making money on EVs, even when they're selling expensive cars. And all we have to do is look at Ford's income statement to see that they're losing, 40% on their Ford's Mustang, Mach-E, and F-150s, which are not cheap cars. These things probably average around somewhere between $50,000 to $60,000 and potentially even more. So, yeah, something to keep an eye on. This just broke today. Expect more of this kind of announcements probably in the next 12 months as legacy automakers, as they embrace for the higher interest rate environment and the costs of building EVs are really starting to catch up to them. This is probably going to be a trend for the foreseeable future. So this is something to keep an eye on that. So let me know if you have any comments in the comment section below as we're doing this live. I'll do a little bit of Q&A after we're done covering this and the next bit of news, which is out of the California Department of Motor Vehicles. So now we have a lot of information as to why Cruise was suspended. In case you're not familiar with the story, yesterday, California suspended Cruise's ability. So Cruise is the self-driving division for GM. They suspended their ability to operate in California effective immediately outside of being able to have test vehicles with a driver behind the steering wheel. And the reason why that is because there was an accident that happened earlier this month where it looks like the car didn't have the right safety capabilities and Cruise potentially may have withheld information that could have impacted the research of the motor vehicle department out of California. So I'm going to read the entire statement from the DMV because I think it's very important for all of us to have all the context. I think, I don't want to disparage Cruise. I don't want to disparage GM. I just want to highlight just how hard it is to have a self-driving car to operate properly. But it also really highlights some of the missteps that Cruise may have had in their process. And I also want to talk about what this means more broadly for self-driving technology and other players as well. So let's go ahead and read the statement together. Do bear with me. I know this is going to probably take a few minutes, but I really think it's super, super important. So this was released on October 24th, so yesterday, from the Department of Motor Vehicles of California. The autonomous vehicle testing permit driverless vehicle issued to Cruise LLC is hereby suspended immediately for violations. Okay, so let's read through the facts so you are 100% on the same page as we are. On October 2nd at approximately 9:30, an accident occurred on or around 5th and Market Street in San Francisco. A pedestrian was struck while in the crosswalk by an unknown third-party vehicle and fell into the path of a Cruise autonomous vehicle. The autonomous vehicle initiated a hard-braking maneuver and came to a complete stop. During the course of performing the hard-braking maneuver, the autonomous vehicle collided with and ran over the pedestrian. After coming to a complete stop, the AV subsequently attempted to perform a pullover maneuver while the pedestrian was underneath the vehicle. The autonomous vehicle traveled approximately 20 feet and reached a speed of 7 miles per hour before coming to a subsequent and final stop. The pedestrian remained under the vehicle. On October 3rd, representatives of the Department of Motor Vehicles and the California Highway Patrol met with representatives from Cruise to discuss the accident. During the meeting, the department was shown video footage of the accident captured by the AV's onboard cameras. The video footage presented to the department ended with the AV's initial stop following the hard-braking maneuver. Footage of the subsequent movement of the AV to perform a pullover maneuver was not shown to the department, and Cruise did not disclose that any additional movement of the vehicle had occurred after the initial stop of the vehicle. The department only learned of the AV's subsequent movement via discussion with another government agency. The department requested Cruise provide a copy of the video with the additional footage, which was received by the department on October 13th, 2023. So just a real quick summary on that. Somebody hit a pedestrian. This is just a terrible story. Somebody hit a pedestrian. The pedestrian then was flung into the path of the cruise. The cruise tried to stop. Unfortunately, the pedestrian ended up under the cruise vehicle. And then after the cruise vehicle stopped, it started making a maneuver to pull over while the pedestrian was underneath the autonomous vehicle. And it seems to have dragged that person for another 20 feet at a maximum of 7 miles per hour. And then it came to a stop with the person still under the car. So that's what it seems like, just based on the facts that we've just read. So now let's go ahead and read why the Department of Motor Vehicles decided to suspend Cruise. After coming to an initial stop following the accident, the autonomous vehicle attempted to perform a pullover maneuver while the pedestrian was under the vehicle. This action increased the risk of and may have caused further injury to the pedestrian. The subsequent maneuvering of the vehicle indicates that Cruise's vehicles may lack the ability to respond in a safe and appropriate manner during incidents involving a pedestrian so as to not unnecessarily put the pedestrian or others at risk of further injury. Although the accident involved a vehicle operating under Cruise's deployment permit, the behavior of the vehicle raises concerns that vehicles operated under Cruise's driverless testing permit also lack the ability to respond in a safe and appropriate manner during incidents involving a pedestrian. Until the department can make a determination regarding the safe operation of the vehicles, the continued operation of Cruise's driverless test vehicles on public roads poses an unreasonable risk to the public. And if we look at the sort of basis of suspension, so it's 13 CCR 227-42C, lawyers speak, the department shall immediately suspend or revoke the manufacturer's testing permit or manufacturer's testing permit driverless vehicles if a manufacturer is engaging in a practice in such a manner that immediate suspension is required for the safety of persons on a public road. So one of the reasons why they got suspended is because the motor vehicle department thinks that Cruise vehicles are not behaving in a safe manner. They think in some situations that could potentially harm people. So that's one reason. And then the second reason, any act or omission of the manufacturer or one of its agents, employees, contractors, or designees, which the department finds makes the conduct of autonomous vehicle testing on public roads by the manufacturer an unreasonable risk to the public. So any act or omission of the manufacturer or one of its agents. During the meeting on October 3rd, Cruise failed to disclose that the AV executed a pullover maneuver that increased the risk of and may have caused further injury to a pedestrian. Cruise's omission hinders the ability of the department to effectively and timely evaluate the safe operation of Cruise's vehicles and puts the safety of the public at risk. All right. So this is kind of a big deal, I think. Now, let me sort of share my thoughts with this context in mind. I still feel that autonomous vehicles are, on average, safer. Even when something like this happens, which is extremely unfortunate, I think there is data that proves that autonomous vehicles are safer. However, there are situations where that safety is going to come into question when the vehicle performs in a way that is completely unnatural, right? If you hit somebody, never hit somebody. So if you hit somebody and somebody lands under your car, you're not going to freaking keep driving with that car under your car, especially if you've seen that person. You stop, you get out, you be like, yo, are you okay? Oh my God, I can't believe this happened, right? So that sort of behavior is one of those edge cases that when an automaker is developing their autonomous vehicle platforms, they're probably not like, it's not front of mind. What if a person gets flung into our car and they end up under the car, and then we have to think about what the car needs to do to maneuver? When it happens, it becomes quite obvious, like, yo, why didn't you know what to do there? Like, that's crazy. You should have known what to do there, right? But it really highlights the complexity and the difficulty of autonomous vehicles. And even a company like Cruise, which I still think is doing a great thing by putting autonomous vehicles out there on the road, it really highlights it doesn't matter really how many sensors you have in your car. There are still going to be situations that are going to be very difficult to handle because your car potentially doesn't know or doesn't have the right data to account for it because a human hasn't sat down and physically accounted for that thing. So that's a very important thing, right? And let's not even talk about the fact that Cruise, according to the Department of Motor Vehicles in California, they withheld information, that's what they're claiming, on October 3rd, that showed the car maneuvering in that way that I just described, that is completely inhuman, where you're just dragging a poor person as you're trying to pull over the car instead of like stopping and just, assessing the situation, right? So that's a whole separate issue. And I think if that really happened, I think Cruise should have what's coming for them, because that's completely unacceptable in my opinion. So then the broader discussion becomes, what is the best way to account for something like that happening, right? All these corner cases, all these edge cases that those that are familiar with self-driving technology constantly bring up as one of the main reasons why it's so difficult to do self-driving. It's not the 95% or even the 99% of the time, or even the 99.9% of the time that you're on the road and everything seems normal that autonomous vehicles could handle. It's all these little random things that happen on the road that are just very difficult to simulate or very difficult to account for. And how do you build a reliable enough system to be able to account for all those things, right? So this is where it's very interesting to see moving forward how companies like Cruise, Waymo, and all these other companies that are using a host of radars, LiDAR sensors to gauge what's going around them. It's going to be very curious to see how they handle those edge cases, and then compare it to somebody like a Tesla who's doing it vision only with an artificial intelligence process that just uses cameras to look around itself, and then it makes decisions based on video. It's going to be very interesting to see how they're going to be able to handle their exceptions versus how everybody else is going to be able to handle their exceptions. And I think it also highlights, if we focus on Tesla for a second, Tesla is not operating as a level 4 plus system yet, right? Cruise is a level 4 system, meaning that it's driverless, whereas Tesla is a level 2 system that just happens to be so advanced that it can do your driving most of the time, like a huge majority of the time. And this sort of highlights, I think, a strategy as well, where Cruise and Waymo are being quite gutsy here, and I applaud those guys for being as gutsy as they are by going straight to level 4, making it happen. But then Tesla's like, yo, let's gather the data, and then once we feel confident that we have what we need to go level 4, then we go level 4, right? They're quote unquote later to the game than a Cruise and Waymo, but then I think the broader question becomes, do they happen to have the right system now to be able to handle things like these situations, these corner cases that Cruise is now dealing with, So, and of course, the worst thing about this whole thing is that somebody got hurt, by far. Somebody got hurt. I mean, really, the person being hit by the hit and run person, that's really the person at fault here. And of course, Cruise has some fault as well, because they've dragged the poor person further. It's like insult to injury, right? But that initial car is really at fault. And if you had an autonomous car, would that have happened? Would that person be struck in the first place if you had an autonomous car instead of a person driving the car? So, and then the other question as well becomes, what does this mean for the broader adoption of autonomous vehicles when something like this happens in California? And is that going to sully the image of autonomous vehicles? Because, you already have people up in arms in California complaining about these Cruises and Waymos that are holding up traffic and creating all these crazy traffic scenarios, and already being pissed off. And now you have something like this breaks where, hey, the autonomous vehicle didn't handle that situation properly after something unfortunate happened. So it adds another layer of complexity for the adoption of self-driving vehicles. So a lot of stuff happening there. Let's read some comments and see what people are thinking. But yeah, those are sort of my overarching thoughts, and I'm thinking about this right now. But I think being able to process the surroundings like a human would in this situation, I think gives Tesla's approach a little bit more substance, right? Because there's a lot of doubt around how they're approaching the 8-camera system with the AI brain, right? But a situation like this is a perfect one, because you don't really have to sit down and code for every situation that could come up. You just let the AI figure it out. And there's a good chance, one would think, that the AI would have probably figured out how to handle that thing, because it's observed, unfortunately as it may be, it has observed everything on the roads. It pulls in the data, it says, this is how I'm going to handle it moving forward, and then it will probably handle things you haven't even thought of. it already has figured out how to handle because it's seen it and it's learned from it, just like a human. It basically has built-in intuition because of the video that it's analyzing, versus somebody saying, if human on their car, do not move. And then you sort of go further into, okay, what are other situations that you have to code in? So anyway, very complex, very complex. And I urge you to go out there and research this topic on your own. This is brand new. I mean, there's very few people that are really on the cutting edge of this stuff. There's only really, a handful of companies that are tackling this thing head on. So it's still in its infancy. And this is just a very small example of what this path is going to look like in the future for autonomous vehicles. This is something that could go wrong, and it's super unfortunate. And my thoughts are truly with the family that have been impacted by this. So, okay. My first thought when I read about this accident, could FSD do any better? If someone happened to end up under the car, I have doubts. That's a phenomenal question, right? I mean, that's the overarching premise here is like, you have edge cases that are clearly, that Cruise didn't properly account for in this situation. Could FSD do any better? The way I'm thinking about it is, if you have a system that's purely based on analyzing the world using video, and in theory you have a simulation as well where you can simulate whatever you want just using video, and then the video gets fed into an AI brain and the AI brain figures out how to handle the situation, to me that seems like a much more holistic approach of solving for edge cases than physically coding in every edge case. So you're offloading you're offloading the edge case work to a system that gets smarter the more chips you put in and the more videos you put in, than ensuring that you have the right coders in place to account for those things. Does that make any sense? We won't know until Tesla goes level 4. That's really the key litmus test. But, we'll see. We'll see. I find it hard to believe FSD would handle it any better. I mean, I can tell you FSD in its current form probably wouldn't be able even to handle it, because as soon as, if that were to happen, God forbid, the car probably would have said take over, or the person just takes over. Again, because it's level 2, it's not level 4. So yeah. These are great. These are the right questions to ask. Given the challenges of city driving, do you think it should be separated from highway FSD? If so, do you think a highway-only FSD product would be ready for level 3, level 4 regulatory approval today? That's a great question. So Mercedes kind of already does this, right? Mercedes has this level 3 system that's coming out that says you can... You don't have to pay attention. You don't have to look at use the steering wheel. You can do whatever you want as long as the car is going 45 miles per hour or slower. You're in a traffic jam. It's sunny. You're on a highway, and there's lanes and everything. They have a lot of if a lot of if statements based on that system. So I think there's already a blueprint for Tesla to go down that path to enable level 3 or level 4 in highways for their system. For me, when I use FSD on the highways, it's phenomenal. It's really, 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 really good. So I wouldn't be surprised if Tesla gets at that point. Probably with version 12, if I were to guess. But I think the way they're thinking about it is they want to probably turn it on for everything so that they can do driverless on the highway as well. So they can just, don't even have to worry about, when it transitions from highway to city, sort of it switches over. I think they just want to do it once and done. But who knows? They might. I think autopilot and self-driving is already kind of there, but we'll see. Please comment. Okay. Legacy has Osborne itself with NACS. Pretty sure this is why nobody wants a Legacy EV. Who would until 2025? For those that are not familiar, the Osborne effect is when a company destroys itself because it's coming out with a product that's significantly better than what they have now, but that product is so far out that by the time it launches, people have stopped buying its current product. That's the Osborne effect. And NACS is Tesla's charging standard that every legacy automaker has adopted. I don't know. That's a good question. I think some people will want to wait to buy their new EVs in 2025. What legacy automakers have for them is that they have gas cars that are still being sold, which is what's actually making the company money. And so as long as they're able to do that, theoretically, they're not really Osborning themselves. They're just delaying the purchases of really good EVs. The question becomes, are they going to have enough time to get those EVs out without their gas car business collapsing. Yeah. And then the other thing to keep in mind too is that even though they're not on NACS, starting next year, all the existing EVs will get the adapter to use NACS. So it's not like existing EVs won't be able to use Tesla supercharger network. They'll have access to an adapter where they can use Tesla supercharger network. So it's just a question of the plug. But I'm sure there's other things going on with the car as well, outside of just the plug, that will make them significantly better starting in 2025. Who knows? That's a good question. Just tuning in from Giga, Texas. LOL, on break right now. Love it here so far. It's my first month. Awesome, Anthony. Thank you for the super chat. Why are you sending me money, bro? You should be saving it. You're only there for the first month, bro. You gotta pay rent. Thank you so much. Appreciate you, Anthony. Really appreciate your support. Another super chat from Ishan, longtime supporter. Love you, brother. How do you think the American public will react if GM needs another bailout 15 years from the previous one? Some politicians out of business. Yeah, no, I don't think so. Yeah, I think the public, I do think the public is already aware of GM being bailed out in 2008, excuse me. But, if GM going under will significantly hurt the economy to a point that it could crater and make a very significant impact, I think the government will be biased towards bailing them out. But the truth of the matter is that GM is clearly very close to this current administration. And so let's say this administration is still in the White House and GM starts going towards the direction of needing a bailout. I'm pretty sure they'll get it anyway. Because it's obvious. Because Mayor-led. Of course they're going to get the bailout. But yeah, who knows? Thanks for the question. Mercedes is effectively running a play fake for Tesla. If Mercedes is praised for doing it all, Tesla can't say, then show they can do it better. Question. Yeah, I'm confused by this. If Mercedes is praised for doing it all, Tesla can say, then show they can do it better. Yeah. So I'm assuming as you mean Mercedes, the self-driving system on the highways. Tesla could just, come in and be like, yo, check this out. Ours is better. Yeah, they could, for sure. But we also have to keep in mind is that by and large, mainstream media historically has not been kind to Tesla, probably because it doesn't spend a lot of money on advertising with them, or really any money advertising with them. And so they're not really incentivized. They're disincentivized. No, I'm sorry. They're incentivized to cover them in any way they want to drive clicks. Whereas traditional media, if you look at how they run headlines for legacy automakers, it's a different tone because those legacy automakers advertise with those mainstream companies, and those mainstream media companies, if they keep saying bad things about GM or Ford, GM's going to be like, what the hell, bro? We're giving you all this money to run our advertisement and you're running out there saying all kinds of crazy stuff about us. What the hell? And I'm not saying that happens like exactly to the T, but you can see how there's an incentive structure to not want to talk badly about companies that are funding your survival through advertising. My opinion. Might be conspiracy theorist. I don't know. A real person also can make the same mistake. How do you weigh this to each other? Fantastic question, Robert. We're talking about Cruise making that, dragging somebody across for the 20 feet. And that's the true thing here is that humans make mistakes on the road all the freaking time. But when a human is not responsible for making the mistake, it becomes a whole different equation. Because it's like, see, if you look at my shirt, the robots are coming, right? The robots are the ones that are causing the problem. It's not the humans, because the human wouldn't have dragged the person because they're smart enough to know that the person landed underneath them. Yeah, but will that happen 100% of the time? Probably not. Sometimes people are in shock, and then they're like, "Oh my god, I need to pull over," and they completely forget that the person's under the car. This is where the overall data for autonomous systems versus humans becomes so crucial, because you need a long time to gather that data for autonomous systems to ensure that they are safer than a human. And this is where, Cruise is doing level 4 and they have level 4 data, but a company like Tesla, this is where they're potentially at an outsized advantage, is even though they're running level 2 and they're officially level 2. In a lot of ways, Tesla's system is good enough for level 4 95% plus of the time. So they have data that could back this up in the long term. But this is just all a question of data, and you need conclusive data, and you need billions of miles of data. And it's going to take time. It's going to take time. So, but we'll see. I'm curious to see how California handles this cruise situation, because if, let's say, in a month's time, they reinstate the suspension, or they lift the suspension because they feel like Cruise has done enough to not allow this to happen ever again, and they allow them to run again, then that's a signal that says, hey, there's some leeway. Like, yeah, it was tragic and it was awful that this happened, but let's also be honest that humans get into accidents all the freaking time. So if the overall accidents come down because we're having more AVs, autonomous vehicles on the road, then it's clearly good for the public. And then it becomes, okay, which states are going to be willing to implement that policy without, potentially being afraid of being voted out for, oh, you're putting in technology that's killing people. It becomes politics, right? And it's obviously this is where this is going. It's going to be politicized to hell. So just brace for that. Brace for that. Let's do a couple more. Do you think the other companies' lame attempts at FSD will hinder the approval time for Tesla FSD? I do think that if companies are not executing at a high level when it comes to self-driving technology, it will obviously play a role into everyone else trying to get in the game. And in a way, I think this might be a positive long-term for the technology, because really, if you don't want to allow systems that are unsafe on the road when they're operating under the level that they're supposed to be operating under, right? Tesla's level 2. They're very clear about level 2. You have to literally acknowledge that you're always going to be paying attention before you can even turn on the system in your car. And so from that standpoint, they have their bases covered. But if a level 4 system needs to reach a certain level and other companies are doing a bad job of reaching that level, the worst case scenario in this situation, I think, is going to be a delay of the technology, not a complete like, hey, this is never going to be adopted. I just think it's going to take longer. Probably people are not going to want to hear that, because they're like, you're messing up a company's ability to save lives. And that's also true. But if the result is, hey, more lives are saved because some companies are not performing well, that's a positive. But you're 100% right that if a company doesn't perform well, then that could ruin it for everybody else for a period of time. It's not going to be permanent, but I do think it will definitely delay. It will definitely delay the technology. So that's why we have to root for, like, if you want self-driving cars on the road, you have to root for Cruise to be successful. You have to root for Waymo to be successful. You have to root for everybody to be successful. Why wouldn't you want to have them be successful? But we also have to be honest about the challenges, and that, hey, this is difficult. Even Tesla's system, I'm sure when they go level 4, they're going to have challenges too, just like Cruise has. It's going to be impossible to avoid them. It's going to be interesting to see how the media covers it. Like, my guess is if this happened to a Tesla car, this will be like national news for the next 3 days, whereas this has already kind of like gone to the background today, so I'm just going to be curious to track that. Breakfast pizza, that's I'm not even going to pull that up. Man. All right, let's go for one more. What milestone do you think causes Elon to feel like his job at Tesla is done and then focuses on SpaceX, or will he always be grinding at Tesla? I think Elon will be at Tesla through the development of the Tesla bot and through the launch and adoption of the Tesla bot. I think after the Tesla bot and sort of the opportunities of that technology and how that can transform the business, we'll have to see. So I think Elon needs work that makes him stimulated. And the thing that makes him stimulated seems like things that are extremely difficult. And if he doesn't have something extremely difficult, it seems like he gets bored. And I think that's normal. I think for a person of his caliber, I think he probably gets bored really easy, and he needs something that's just borderline ruining his life. Something extremely challenging to keep him engaged. And I think after reading his biography from Walter Isaacson and just watching his companies for the last decade plus, it's quite obvious that's how he's wired. He needs chaos in his life to be engaged in something. And if you watch one of his interviews from back in the day with Rainn Wilson, who played Dwight Schrute from The Office, he asked him, what is one thing that really motivates you? And Elon said pressure and necessity, I think was the two words he used, pressure and necessity. What's the best way to always be, if you think about first principles thinking, how do I maximize my motivation levels? I maximize pressure and necessity. How many people want to live like that? I think there's proof that that's how he wants to live for the rest of his life. I hope at some point he can find the joy and the peace and not being in that sort of mind state at all times. But the guy knows himself better than anybody else. So who am I to tell him how to live his life? All right, everybody. Thank you so much for stopping in. Love you guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow's Ford's earnings should be an interesting day. Take it easy. And then we'll do the little outro thing if I can figure out how to do it. There we go. Bye-bye.